Good morning. Welcome to another simple truth. Last time I challenged you with this whole gap theory idea. The fact that God wants you to meet his standards, but you and I are unable to do that without the help of Jesus, that Jesus fills in that gap. And let me tell you today about a few areas that I think that this is super relevant in. One of the things that I've been asked over the past few weeks that Simple Truths have been running is when are you going to get to some of the things, Andy, that you have spoken in the past that have really touched lives. And again, when you don't take down notes, when you don't do things from paper, it's really hard to remember necessarily what you've said. But second, it's hard to go back and be able to do those things exactly the same way. But one of the key things that we do down here at the Epicenter, one of the things that I embrace wholeheartedly, partly because of where I've been in life, but partly because I just simply know that it's truth, is this whole idea of dropping your rock. You have not heard me speak if you haven't heard me mention drop your rock, and are you willing to? And it's based out of the story in John chapter 8, where a lady was dragged from a moment of prostitution in front of Jesus. Now, again, the short version of this is that this woman was caught in the act of adultery. She was caught dead to rights. And according to the biblical law, she had the right to be stoned. That the people who caught her had the right to go ahead and stone her. And yet these men who were really trying to set up Jesus, they were trying to entrap him so that he would release her so then they could say that he was against the law. And Jesus did something that is very relevant to you and I as a body. You and I, when we're dealing with groups of people. And Jesus looked at this woman, and his compassion for this woman did not excuse away her sin. Instead, what he did was he looked at the men, the people who were bringing her in front of him, and they were challenged by Jesus to think differently. You see, Jesus turned the tables and said, listen, I'm not going to argue with your right to stone her. I'm not arguing with the fact that she was caught in adultery and doing wrong things. There was no rationalization. There was no trying to say that what she did was okay. Instead, he turned to them and he said, listen, you who's without sin, you throw the first stone. See, he changed the tables for you and I when we're dealing with people who sin. To not just deal with their sin, but to look at our own lives. You see, they had a right to stone her. There's just no doubt about that. But the truth of the matter is, Jesus was asking them to drop their rock, to drop their right to stone her because they were willing to look at their own lives. Because the truth of the matter is that in order for them to throw a stone at her, they're going to have to deal with the sin in their own life first. It's the same thing as take, the plank out of your own eye before you take the speck out of your neighbor's. Again, Jesus isn't saying it's okay to sin. Jesus isn't saying that, listen, what she did was okay. What Jesus was saying is that when you and I deal with sin, we need to be really careful. We need to understand that we are to drop our right, to stone another person and give that right to Jesus. You see, accidentally on purpose, these men brought her to the only place that she was going to experience true forgiveness, the only place she really needed to be. They brought her to Jesus. You see, that's what you and I are to do. We're to bring people to Jesus, and once we bring them to Jesus, drop our rights to vengeance, to punishment, to discipline. You see, discipline within the church, it only goes one place, and that's to Jesus. The Bible's very clear about that we discipline people to get them to Jesus. But once we get them to Jesus, we drop our rights because why? Because we could be dragged in front of Jesus just as well. You see, the truth is, Jesus knew the sins of these men, and he knew that every single one of them could be in the exact same boat. The difference is hidden sin and exposed sin. We destroy exposed sin by bringing people to Jesus, not by destroying the person who was exposed. You see, we're forcing as churches people to go with hidden sin because they're deathly afraid we're not going to bring them to Jesus. And the truth of the matter is, you and I rarely bring people to Jesus first. We bring people to other people first, to ourselves first, to the court of public opinion first. Then we'll bring them to Jesus. Once we get our pound of flesh, so to speak, then we're willing to give people and turn them over to Jesus. But what we turn over to Jesus is destroyed people. That's not what Jesus is about. And Jesus is about freeing people. Discipline gets people to Jesus, and then we leave them with Jesus. And then Jesus recovers them, restores them, and sends them out with a sense of resurgence. It's hard for Jesus to do that when we've beaten people to shreds. You see, you and I give up our rights to discipline, to vengeance, because we know that God has a better plan. The truth is that there are people who would love to see me punished and people that I would love to see punished. There are people that we look at and we say, God, I hope that they get what they deserve. That's a dangerous thing to say, because God knows that the way we judge is the way we're going to be judged, that the way that we forgive is the way that we're going to be forgiven. And we're going to talk about that next time on Simple Truth. But for today, let me leave you with this challenge. Go to John chapter 8, read the story, and see what happens. Put yourself in that story. Are you like the woman who was dragged in front of Jesus? Is that what you need? That you're waiting for somebody to bring you to Jesus, but instead they just keep bringing you to people? Are you one of those with a stone? That you just got somebody dead to rights, that you know that they're wrong, you know they're a sinner, you know they've done bad things, and you got them. And you're bringing them to Jesus, not so that he can restore them, so that he can punish them. And Jesus is going to challenge you today in your thinking. Are you willing to drop your rock, your right to hurt someone else? Because you know that at some point you've either been in that position, you are in that position, or you will be in that position. Listen, be really careful when throwing rocks at other people.